The cry was so thin, so fragile, that Martha almost dismissed it as a trick of the wind whistling through the gnarled branches of the apple trees, a sound lost against the steady drumming of the New England drizzle on the barn's tin roof. Her calloused 60-year-old hands paused midway through wiping down the worn porcelain of her morning coffee cup, her entire body freezing as she strained to listen. It wouldn't be the first time the lonely expanse of the orchard had played tricks on her mind, the whispering winds often morphing into phantom sounds during the long, quiet mornings. But there it was again, a soft, plaintive whimper, almost a moan, drifting from the direction of the old barn. Martha dried her hands on her faded apron, the familiar ache in her knuckles, a dull protest against the damp cold that seeped through the very bones of the farmhouse. Her eyes, still sharp despite her years, darted to the glowing green numbers on the microwave. 6:47 a.m. It was too early for any visitors, and far too late in the morning to be a figment of her imagination. The wet gravel of the path crunched under her worn work boots as she crossed the yard, the light drizzle plastering strands of gray hair to her face. Something in her chest, a nameless primal instinct, urged her to hurry, the crying growing more distinct with each step. When she reached the massive, weathered entrance of the barn, her eyes needed a moment to adjust from the gray morning light to the cavernous dimness inside. The familiar, comforting scent of hay, damp earth, and the sweet rot of fallen apples was pierced by something else, something alien that didn't belong. Her heart began to pound a heavy rhythm against her ribs as she followed the sound, now unmistakably the cry of a baby. Then she saw it, a dark bundle tucked partially behind a stack of hay bales on the dirt floor. Martha approached with a slowness born of shock, her hands trembling not just from the cold, but from a deep, unsettling premonition. It was an old, dirty blanket, but it had been carefully folded into an improvised bassinet. And nestled inside, "Oh, dear God," she whispered, dropping to her knees, were two tiny pink faces, as identical as two freshly picked apples, squirming within the folds. They were newborns, no more than a few days old, clean and dressed in soft onesies, despite the filth of the blanket that cradled them. Someone had cared for them, tended to them, even in the act of abandoning them. With a trembling hand, Martha stroked one baby's cheek. The skin was cool, but not icy. They hadn't been here long. As her maternal instincts, dormant for 2 decades, surged to life, she adjusted the blanket to better shield them from the chill. In the movement, something small and plastic-wrapped fell to the ground. It was a folded piece of paper inside a small Ziploc baggie. Martha picked up the note with numb fingers, her heart already bracing for the impact, somehow knowing her life was about to be irrevocably altered. The handwriting, even after 20 years, was as familiar to her as her own reflection in the mirror. "Mom, these are your grandchildren. Forgive me for everything. Emily." The world seemed to dissolve around Martha. The sound of the rain, the smell of the orchard, the chill in the air, everything vanished, replaced by the deafening silence of those words and the two tiny faces before her. Emily. Her Emily. The name she hadn't allowed herself to speak aloud for 2 decades, not since that last bitter fight, not since her only daughter had slammed the farmhouse door and vanished from her life. One of the babies let out a stronger cry, a demanding sound that snapped Martha back to the present. Her hands were already moving with an automatic, remembered grace, pulling the blanket aside. Twins. A boy and a girl, she discovered after a quick, gentle check. Her grandchildren. The word echoed in her mind, a tolling bell of shock and wonder. "Shh," she whispered, scooping them both into her arms with a practiced skill she thought she'd long forgotten. "Grandma's here." The word felt natural on her tongue, even as her heart was still reeling from the shock. Where was Emily? Why would she leave her babies like this in the cold, damp barn? What kind of danger was her daughter in to have done something so desperate? Martha stood, the weight of the babies in her arms grounding her, her body ignoring the protests of age and arthritis to cocoon these precious new lives. The drizzle had intensified into a steady rain, and she used her own body as a shield, running back toward the house, each splashing step raising more questions, more fears, more dreadful possibilities about what could have happened to her daughter. But alongside the fear, a different feeling was growing in her chest: determination. The same fierce protective instinct she'd felt the day Emily was born 40 years ago was roaring back to life. Whatever secrets, whatever dangers her daughter was facing, Martha would protect these children with every fiber of her being. Inside the warm, familiar kitchen, while improvising diapers out of clean dish towels and searching for the old baby bottle she'd kept purely for sentimental reasons, Martha looked again at their now calmer faces. She could see Emily as a baby in their delicate features, the same curve of the nose, the same shape of the eyes. "What trouble have you gotten yourself into this time, my girl?" she murmured to herself, preparing warm milk with a muscle memory that never truly fades. One of the babies, the boy, grabbed her finger with a surprising strength, and Martha felt tears she hadn't shed in years, begin to roll down her weathered cheeks. 20 years of silence, 20 years of wounded pride and unspoken words. And now, this. Her daughter had found the only way to breach the fortress Martha had built around her heart, sending 2 innocent lives as her emissaries, asking for nothing but love and protection. As she rocked the twins, now warm and fed, Martha knew her quiet, solitary life was over. She looked out the kitchen window at the rain still falling on the orchard, imagining her daughter out there somewhere, alone and afraid, frightened enough to leave her own children on the property of the mother she hadn't spoken to in 2 decades. "God help us," she whispered, kissing each tiny head. "God help us all." The twins finally slept soundly in the room that had once been Emily's, tucked into a makeshift bed fashioned from old dresser drawers lined with soft blankets. Martha's hands ran over the dark wood of the furniture, recalling the day her late husband had built it for their newborn daughter. Now, more than 3 decades later, it sheltered Emily's children. The sound of tires on the gravel driveway alerted her. Carol. Martha had called her best friend an hour ago, her voice trembling so much she could barely form a coherent sentence. In 30 years of friendship, Carol had never heard her sound like that. Martha opened the door before Carol could even knock. The 2 women stood for a moment, a study in contrasts. Carol, still elegant and put together at 65, with her perfectly coiffed hair and expensive suburban clothes. And Martha, her face lined by years of farm work, still wearing the same stained apron from that morning. "Where are they?" Carol asked, stepping inside quickly, her eyes scanning the room for any sign of the babies, an urgency in her voice that Martha didn't quite recognize. "Sleeping," Martha replied, closing the door. "I just got them to settle down." Carol followed Martha into the kitchen, where an open bottle of wine and 2 glasses waited on the old oak table. Martha filled the glasses, her hands still trembling enough to spill a few drops on the tablecloth. "Tell me everything," Carol demanded, her perfectly manicured fingers drumming lightly on the glass. "From the start." Martha took a deep breath, sipping the wine before she began, the harsh liquid giving her a sliver of courage. "I found them in the barn this morning. 2 babies, Carol. Twins. And a note." Her voice failed her. A note from Emily. Carol went completely still, her sharp eyes fixed on Martha. "After 20 years? 20 years, 3 months, and 17 days, Martha corrected automatically, then let out a humorless laugh. "Pathetic, isn't it? Counting the days like it would make any difference." Silence descended on the kitchen, heavy with 2 decades of unspoken history. The old grandfather clock in the hall marked each second with a merciless tick-tock. "Do you remember that night?" Martha asked softly, her gaze distant, lost in memory. "The night she left?" Carol nodded slowly. How could she forget? She had been the first person Martha had turned to after the fight, showing up at Carol's pristine suburban house at 3 a.m, drenched and utterly devastated. "It was because of that boy," Martha continued, a familiar bitterness lacing her voice. I told her he was no good, that he'd hurt her. She was 19, Carol. 19. She thought she knew everything about life. And you also thought you knew everything, Martha, Carol commented gently. You were both always too stubborn. Martha closed her eyes, the memory as vivid as the rain falling outside now. It was nothing compared to the storm that had raged that night. Emily yelling that she was an adult who could make her own choices. Martha snapping back that as long as she lived under her roof, she would follow her rules. Then I won't live under your roof anymore, Martha quoted her daughter's final cutting words. And she just left, grabbed a backpack, some clothes, and disappeared into the night. She wouldn't answer my calls, changed her number. It was like she died. A faint cry drifted from the bedroom, and Martha was on her feet in an instant. Carol followed her into Emily's old room, where the twins, Harper and Owen, now slept. Martha gently adjusted the blanket on the fussing baby, who soon calmed. "They're beautiful," Carol whispered, her gaze lingering on the twins. There was something in her expression that made Martha frown, but it vanished so quickly she thought she must have imagined it. "But Martha, you need to think clearly now. This is child abandonment. Emily left 2 newborns in a barn, alone." "She must be in trouble," Martha defended immediately. "My daughter would never do this without a very serious reason." "That's exactly why," Carol insisted, her voice soft but firm. "If she's in such serious trouble that she abandoned her own children, you should call the police. They can help find her, protect her." Martha shook her head vehemently. "No. If Emily didn't go to the police, she must have her reasons. She chose to come to me, Carol. After 20 years, she trusted me to protect her children." Carol touched her friend's arm gently. "And if she's in danger? What if whoever is threatening her comes after the babies?" "Then I'll protect them," Martha answered, her voice filled with a steely determination Carol knew all too well. "They're my grandchildren, my family. I won't fail Emily again." "Martha, no." "Carol, I won't involve the police, not yet. I need to try to fix things my way this time." Carol sighed, stepping back. She recognized that tone. It was the same tone Martha had used when she decided to raise Emily alone after her husband's death. The same tone she'd used when she refused to sell the orchard, despite everyone's advice. "What will you do when people start asking questions?" 2 babies don't just appear on a farm without anyone noticing. Martha had already considered that. "I'll say they're the children of a niece who's ill. I don't get many visitors anyway, and you know the nearest neighbors live miles away." Carol watched her friend for a long, heavy moment. Martha could almost see the gears turning in her friend's mind, weighing options, considering risks. "You're going to help me, aren't you?" Martha asked, her voice betraying a vulnerability she rarely showed. "I need you, Carol. Like that night." Carol embraced her friend, and Martha didn't see the shadow that passed through her eyes. "Of course I'll help you, Martha. I've always been here for you, haven't I?" One of the babies shifted in its sleep, and both women looked down at the tiny, peaceful forms. Martha felt her heart tighten. Somewhere out there, her daughter was alone, possibly in danger. But this time would be different. This time, she wouldn't let Emily face whatever it was alone. "I'll make more coffee," Carol offered, already heading for the door. "You'll need to stay up tonight, and we have a lot to plan." Martha nodded, her eyes still fixed on the twins. She didn't notice when Carol paused at the doorway, her hand gripping the doorframe just a little too tightly, a visible conflict flashing across her face before she composed herself and went into the kitchen. The grandfather clock continued its relentless ticking, marking the beginning of a new, dangerous chapter for that family, a chapter that, as Martha did not yet know, would be far more complex and painful than she could ever imagine. Ethan parked his unmarked police cruiser in front of his mother's immaculate suburban house, turning off the engine but remaining in the car for a few moments. Something in Carol's tone over the phone had bothered him. In 15 years as a Boston detective, he'd learned to trust his gut, and something about this situation felt decidedly wrong. "Ethan," Carol said, opening the door before he'd even reached the porch, her smile far too tense. "I'm so glad you came quickly." The house was perfect, as always, but Ethan noticed the small tells of his mother's agitation. A half-finished cup of coffee on the end table, a wrinkled newspaper on the sofa, slightly crooked curtains. These were little details Carol, with her meticulous nature, would normally never allow. "So," he began, settling into his usual armchair, "what's so urgent it couldn't wait until Sunday dinner?" Carol perched on the edge of the sofa, her hands twisting in her lap. "It's about Martha." Ethan frowned. Martha was practically his second mother, his mom's best friend since before he was born. "What about her?" "Something unusual happened at the orchard." Carol paused, carefully choosing her words. "2 babies showed up there yesterday morning." "What do you mean, showed up?" Ethan's posture shifted subtly, the detective in him taking over. They were left in the barn. Newborns, twins. Carol stood pacing the length of the room, with a note from her daughter, Emily. "Emily?" Ethan leaned forward. "The same Emily who disappeared 20 years ago?" "The very one," Carol confirmed, stopping at the window and gazing out without really seeing. "Martha is convinced Emily's in some sort of danger, which is why she left the babies with her." Ethan watched his mother carefully. There was something in her stance, a tension that didn't quite align with the concern she was trying to project. "And why are you telling me this, Mom? Did Martha ask for police assistance?" "No," Carol replied, a little too quickly, turning to face him. "No, she doesn't want to involve the police. But I thought maybe you could take a look. Off the record, for Martha's sake." Ethan leaned back, crossing his arms. "Take a look at what exactly?" "Emily, where she's been all these years. What could have driven her to abandon 2 newborns?" Carol sat again, leaning toward her son. "You have access to databases, records." "Records I can't access without official justification," Ethan interrupted. "You know that." "But Ethan, what if she's really in danger? Martha is alone on that farm with 2 babies. If someone's after Emily—" Ethan noticed the slight tremor in Carol's hands. There was too much urgency in her voice, too much pointed interest in the details. "What aren't you telling me, Mom?" Carol blinked, startled. "What do you mean? In 15 years on the force, you've never asked me to investigate anything off the record." "Why now? Why this urgency?" "I'm just worried about Martha, that's all." Carol got up again and walked toward the kitchen. Ethan followed. "Martha has always been perfectly capable of taking care of herself," he commented, watching his mother prepare more coffee with nervous, jerky hands. "And you've never been one to meddle in her decisions. Things are different now. There are children involved." Ethan moved closer, gently taking the coffee pot from his mother's trembling hands. "You knew Emily, didn't you, before she ran off?" Carol didn't answer right away, busying herself with wiping an invisible smudge from the granite countertop. "Of course I did. I was her mother's best friend, remember? Then you must have some idea of where she might be, or why she really ran away that night." The cloth Carol was using paused for a fraction of a second, so brief anyone less observant would have missed it. "Emily was a rebellious teenager," Carol finally replied. "She wanted to follow her own path. That's all." Ethan leaned against the counter, studying his mother's tense profile. "And now, 20 years later, she abandons 2 newborns at her mother's orchard. Don't you think that's strange? That's why I'm worried." Carol threw the cloth into the sink with more force than necessary. "That's why I want you to investigate." "Mom," Ethan said, gently grasping Carol's shoulders and making her face him, "if you know something that could help Emily, you need to tell me, officially or not." For a fleeting moment, something flickered in Carol's eyes, fear, guilt, but then she smiled, that same practiced smile Ethan knew from childhood, the one she used to insist everything was fine, even when it wasn't. "I just want to help my friend, son. You'd do the same in my place." Ethan sighed, releasing her. He knew he wouldn't get anything more out of her at that moment. "I'll see what I can find, but I'm not promising anything." "Thank you, dear," Carol said, kissing his cheek. "Just be discreet, okay? I don't want Martha to know I asked for your help." Later, driving back toward Boston, Ethan couldn't shake their conversation. In 30 years of friendship with Martha, his mother had never shown this level of agitated concern. Why now? What had changed? Picking up his phone, he dialed a familiar number. "Mark, I need a favor. Can you do a full deep dive on someone? Name is Emily Miller, missing for 20 years. "Yeah, I'll give you the details." "No, keep it off the books for now. Something's not right about this, and I need to find out what." Back in her house, Carol sat in the darkened living room, her phone trembling slightly in her hand. After several minutes of staring at the screen, she typed a short, terse message. "He's started investigating. What do I do now?" The rain hadn't let up in 3 days, turning the orchard grounds into a muddy quagmire. Martha watched the droplets trace paths down the kitchen window pane as she cradled one of the twins. Carol sat at the table, absently flipping through an old magazine, when an urgent knocking on the door startled them both. At first, they didn't recognize the drenched woman standing on the doorstep, her graying, disheveled hair and soaked clothes clinging to her frame. But then she raised her face, and Martha felt Carol tense beside her. "Abigail," Carol whispered, her voice strangely high-pitched. "Let me in, please," Abigail asked, her eyes anxiously scanning the muddy road behind her. "We need to talk." Martha hesitated for only a moment before stepping aside. The baby in her arms began to cry, perhaps sensing the sudden, sharp tension in the room. "I'll get towels," Carol offered quickly, her voice still unsteady. Abigail stepped inside, leaving a puddle on the living room rug, her eyes locking onto the twins, one in Martha's arms, the other in the small improvised crib by the sofa. "So it's true," she murmured. "Emily managed to bring them here." The sound of her daughter's name made Martha instinctively clutch the baby closer. "You know my Emily?" Carol returned with the towels, handing them to Abigail with stiff, formal movements. Martha noticed her friend's hands were trembling slightly. "We worked together," Abigail explained, drying her hair, "in Richard Harding's office." "Richard Harding?" Martha frowned. The name meant nothing to her. "One of the most powerful men in Boston's construction business," Abigail said, collapsing into an armchair. "Emily was his executive assistant." Carol dropped the cup she was holding, the porcelain shattering on the floor, startling the babies, who began crying in unison. "I'm sorry," Carol muttered, bending down to collect the shards. My hands are shaky today." Martha rocked the twins, trying to soothe them, all the while watching the silent, charged interaction between Carol and Abigail. Something was deeply wrong, something she couldn't quite grasp. "How did you find us?" she finally asked. "Emily told me about the orchard." "About you?" Abigail replied, her eyes following Carol, who was still picking up the fragments with shaky hands. "She kept a photo of you in her desk drawer. Always said she'd return here someday when she had the courage." "Why didn't she ever come back?" Martha's voice faltered. "Why now?" Abigail took a deep breath, as if gathering her strength. Because she discovered something she wasn't supposed to. Something about Richard and his business. Carol stood abruptly, the cup shards rattling in the trash can. "I'll make more coffee." "No," Abigail said with surprising force. "You need to hear this too, Carol." Martha looked between the two women, feeling as though she was missing a crucial piece of the puzzle. Carol remained standing in the middle of the kitchen, her back tense, like a drawn wire about to snap. "Emily found documents," Abigail continued, lowering her voice. "Proof of a massive money laundering scheme. Millions siphoned through fake projects, bribes, fraudulent contracts." "And she?" Martha began, but her voice broke. "She copied everything, every file, every spreadsheet, every forged contract." Abigail pulled a crumpled envelope from her soaked coat. But Richard found out. And Emily. Emily knew too much. Carol made a small, strangled sound. Martha turned to her friend, shocked to see her face as white as paper. "Are you all right, Carol? "I just need some air," Carol mumbled, stumbling toward the window. Abigail watched Carol with an unreadable expression before continuing. "Emily came to me a week ago, desperate. She said she was pregnant with Richard's children, that he didn't know about the babies, and she needed to hide them before it was too late." "Too late for what?" Martha asked, though she already dreaded the answer. "Richard has a track record. People who oppose him tend to disappear." Abigail opened the envelope with trembling fingers. "These are some of the documents Emily copied. Not all of them, she hid most of them somewhere safe. But it's enough to show the danger she's in." Carol spun around abruptly from the window. "We shouldn't be listening to this." "Martha, think of the babies. If anyone finds out they're here—" "That's exactly why I came," Abigail interrupted, "to warn you, to be careful. Richard has eyes and ears everywhere, people who work for him, people he controls." One of the babies whimpered, and Martha automatically rocked it, her mind spinning with everything she was hearing. Her Emily, her little girl, caught up in something so vast and dangerous. "How can we help her?" Martha asked. "There must be something we can do." "For now, protect the twins," Abigail replied, standing up. "And trust no one, not even—" She paused, her eyes locking with Carol's for a tense, charged moment. "Not even who?" Martha insisted. "No one," Abigail finished, looking away. "I'll keep in touch. I have to go now. I've stayed too long." "Wait," Martha called as Abigail reached the door. "Do you know where Emily is?" Abigail hesitated, her hand on the doorknob. "It's better you don't know right now, Martha, but she's alive, and she's fighting to do the right thing." After Abigail left, the silence in the kitchen felt as heavy as lead. Carol still stood near the window, her hands gripping the windowsill so tightly, her knuckles were white. "Carol," Martha asked softly, "are you really all right?" "I'm fine," Carol responded quickly, forcing a smile. "Just worried about you and the babies. This story is so dangerous." Martha observed her longtime friend, noticing for the first time a series of small, odd details. The way she avoided direct eye contact, the slight, persistent tremble in her hands, the pallor that wouldn't leave her face. "Did you know Richard Harding?" Martha asked suddenly. Carol froze for a split second before replying. Just by name." Like Abigail said, he's a powerful businessman. But something in Carol's voice sounded false, like an off-key note in a familiar song. Martha held the twins tighter, feeling a faint, poisonous seed of doubt about her oldest friend begin to sprout for the very first time. Outside, the rain kept falling, washing away Abigail's footprints in the mud. Somewhere out in the darkness, Emily was fighting alone against forces Martha could barely begin to comprehend. And here, in her own kitchen, the seeds of distrust were beginning to grow in the fertile ground of a 30-year friendship. Martha found the small black notebook tucked among the baby things while tidying the bedroom that morning. It looked like a common diary, but her hands shook when she saw Emily's familiar script on the first few pages. Her daughter had always been one to document everything, ever since she was a little girl. "March 25th, she read softly. "Today I discovered something I shouldn't have. I was organizing files for the latest project when I noticed discrepancies. The numbers don't add up. Millions funneled through shell companies. Sam helped me confirm it. It's much bigger than we realized." The sound of an approaching car made Martha quickly hide the notebook under the mattress of the makeshift crib. Carol walked in without knocking, a habit of 30 years. "Martha, I found some baby clothes in the attic," she announced, carrying a cardboard box. Her eyes, however, scanned the room, taking in every detail. "Where's the bag that came with them?" "I put it away," Martha replied vaguely, picking up one of the twins who was starting to fuss. "Where?" Carol pressed, placing the box on the dresser. "There might be important documents in there, something to help find Emily." Martha hesitated. After Abigail's visit the day before, something about Carol's insistence had begun to deeply bother her. "It's in a safe place. But Martha, we need to—" A knock at the front door interrupted Carol. Ethan entered, still in his detective's uniform, his expression serious. "Mom, I didn't know you'd be here," he remarked, a frown creasing his brow as he looked at Carol. "Martha, I need to talk to you. In private." Carol didn't move. "Mom," Ethan said firmly, "please." Something in his tone made Carol step back, but Martha noticed how she lingered close to the door, undoubtedly trying to listen. "I found Samuel Davis," Ethan began in a low voice once they were in the kitchen, the accountant who worked with Emily at Harding Construction. Martha sat still, rocking the baby. "He's in hiding, but he agreed to meet me when I mentioned your name." Emily trusted him. Ethan took a flash drive from his pocket. "He gave me this. It's evidence of the scheme your daughter uncovered." "What kind of evidence? Fake contracts, inflated invoices, shell companies." Richard Harding built an empire on money laundering. Emily and Sam had been gathering evidence for months. In the living room, they heard Carol cough. Ethan lowered his voice further. "Sam told me Emily started suspecting something when she noticed strange payment patterns, projects costing triple the usual amount, materials that never arrived, phantom employees. When she mentioned it to him, he was already investigating on his own. Why didn't he go to the police? Richard Harding has people on his payroll everywhere. Sam tried reporting it once, years ago. The next day, his house accidentally caught fire. Ethan looked significantly toward the door. Since then, he's learned to be more careful who he trusts. Martha held the baby tighter, her thoughts on the diary she'd hidden. Emily found out she was pregnant in the midst of all this? Yes. Sam said she was desperate. She knew Richard would never let his children slip out of his control if he found out. Ethan hesitated. "Martha, Sam told me something else. About the night Emily ran away, 20 years ago." Martha's heart skipped a beat. In the living room, all was silent. "What about that night?" "He said Emily didn't leave just because of a fight. She was threatened. Someone warned her that if she didn't leave town, you would have an accident." Martha felt the blood drain from her face. "Who?" A noise in the living room cut them off. Carol had dropped something. "Sorry," she said, appearing in the kitchen doorway, her face pale. I think I need to go." "Mom," Ethan called, but Carol was already grabbing her purse, her hands visibly shaking. "I just remembered I have an appointment," she mumbled, practically rushing to the door. After Carol left, Ethan turned back to Martha. "Something's off. My mother's been acting suspicious ever since the baby showed up." "I've noticed," Martha admitted, recalling Carol's behavior during Abigail's visit. "She keeps insisting on seeing the baby's things, asking where I'm storing everything." Ethan frowned. "Don't let her find anything, Martha. Not until I finish my investigation." "Do you think Carol—" Martha couldn't finish the sentence. The idea that her best friend could be involved in something so sinister was too painful to voice. "I'm not sure," Ethan replied honestly. "But Sam warned me. Richard Harding has a network of informants, people he controls through blackmail or fear, people you'd never suspect. Above suspicion." Martha thought of the hidden diary, of Emily's words describing her discoveries. She thought of Carol, her friend of 30 years, acting with increasing strangeness. "There's one more thing," Ethan added hesitantly. "Sam is coming here tonight. He has more documents, things Emily left with him for safekeeping. But don't tell anyone. Not even your mother," Martha finished softly. Ethan nodded, the conflict evident on his face. Outside, they heard Carol's car driving away at high speed. Martha rose to look out the window, watching the dust her car kicked up on the road. 30 years of friendship, trust, and shared secrets. How had she been so blind? "I'm assigning trustworthy officers to watch the orchard," Ethan said, getting up. "And Martha, that diary you hid when my mother arrived. I need to see it." Martha stared at him, surprised. "How? I'm a detective, remember?" He gave a sad smile. "And you've never been good at hiding things. Except for my mother, apparently." While Ethan read Emily's diary, Martha rocked the twins, thinking of her daughter out there, alone but fighting something far bigger than herself, and thinking of Carol, and what other secrets her old friend might be hiding. On the dusty road, Carol's car stopped a few miles away. With trembling hands, she picked up her phone and typed a message. Sam will meet them tonight. He has the documents. The night promised for Samuel's visit never came. Ethan arrived at the orchard the next morning, dark circles under his eyes and a grave expression on his face that made Martha sit down before he even spoke. His apartment was broken into last night, Ethan reported, his voice hoarse with fatigue. Before he could get here, they destroyed everything. But Sam managed to escape. Martha gripped the old armchair, the worn upholstery a small comfort under her fingers. How did they know? Someone tipped Richard off, Ethan said, rubbing his face. Someone who knew exactly where and when Sam would be? The sound of Carol's car in the driveway stopped Martha from responding. Her friend came in carrying shopping bags, but froze upon seeing Ethan. "Son, what are you doing here so early?" Ethan studied his mother for a tense, loaded moment. "Investigating a break-in." "Where were you last night, Mom?" "At home, of course," Carol answered too quickly, setting the bags on the table. "Why?" "I tried calling you several times. I took a sleeping pill, Ethan. Didn't hear the phone." Martha watched the exchange between mother and son, noticing the subtle signs she used to overlook. How Carol avoided looking directly at Ethan, the almost imperceptible shaking in her hands as she unpacked groceries, the sheen of sweat on her brow despite the chilly morning. "I brought more baby clothes," Carol announced with forced cheerfulness. "Thought we could organize their things better. That bag is still—" "No," Martha cut in firmly. "Their things are fine where they are." Carol froze for a moment, then forced a smile. "I only want to help, Martha." "You've done plenty already," Martha replied, exchanging a meaningful look with Ethan. Ethan's phone rang, breaking the tension. He answered quickly, his face growing more serious with each word. "I have to go," he said after hanging up. "They found Emily's car, abandoned on the outskirts of Boston." "What?" Martha stood. "Where?" "I can't give details now, but stay here. Both of you," he gave his mother a significant look, "do not leave the orchard." After Ethan left, a heavy shroud of silence fell over the kitchen. Carol continued unpacking groceries with mechanical, jerky motions while Martha watched her, mentally reviewing the last few days. Carol's increasingly frequent visits, her constant questions about the baby's belongings, the discreet phone calls she thought no one noticed, the way she always seemed to know when something was about to happen. One of the twins started crying in the bedroom, and Martha got up to attend to them. When she returned, she found Carol rummaging through the kitchen drawers. "Looking for something in particular, Carol?" Carol jumped, slamming the drawer shut. "I was just looking for an extra bottle nipple. All the bottles are in the dish drainer," Martha pointed out quietly. "As you know, since you helped me wash them yesterday." A guilty flush crept up Carol's neck. "Oh, right. I'm a bit distracted today." "You've been distracted since the babies arrived," Martha remarked, sitting down with the infant in her arms. "Always checking drawers, cupboards, asking about the bag. I'm just worried about you, that's all." "Really?" Martha studied her friend's face. "Or are you looking for something specific, Carol?" Carol's phone vibrated in her purse. She snatched it quickly, but not before Martha saw the name on the screen. "Richard." "I need to take this," Carol muttered, heading out to the porch. Martha held the baby closer, her mind connecting the dots, remembering her conversation with Ethan about Richard Harding's network of informants, people above suspicion, people like her best friend. Through the kitchen window, she could see Carol pacing back and forth on the porch, speaking in low, agitated tones. The other baby began crying, and Martha went back to the bedroom. As she passed the porch, she caught snippets of Carol's conversation. Couldn't find it. She must have hidden it somewhere else. "Yes, I'm still looking." Martha's heart clenched. 20 years of friendship, and now every word Carol spoke sounded like a lie, every gesture a cover for betrayal. When she returned to the kitchen with both babies, Carol had finished the call, her face pale and tense. That was Ethan, she lied. Apparently, they found clues in Emily's car. Martha nodded, pretending to believe her. What kind of clues? He didn't go into detail. Carol grabbed her purse. I should go. I'll come back later to help with the babies. No need, Martha replied softly. I think I can manage on my own today. Something flickered in Carol's eyes, fear, guilt, but she just nodded and left quickly. The moment Carol's car disappeared down the road, Martha picked up her phone, her hands trembling as she dialed Ethan's number. Did you really find Emily's car? Yes, Ethan answered hesitantly. How did you? Carol told me. You called about clues. A heavy, damning silence on the other end of the line. I haven't called my mother today, Martha. Martha closed her eyes, feeling the crushing weight of the confirmation she'd expected. Ethan, I think your mother is working for Richard Harding. I know, he replied, the pain evident in his voice. I just found out. Someone used my police credentials last night. The only other person who knows my password is... Carol, Martha finished. Stay on the farm, Ethan instructed. I'm sending a trusted team to keep watch. And Martha, don't let my mother in again. Not until we sort this out. After hanging up, Martha sank into the old rocking chair, the twins asleep in her arms. Outside, the afternoon light faded, painting the sky in shades of orange and bruised purple. Somewhere, Emily was on the run, fighting, trying to do the right thing. And here, at the orchard, her best friend of 30 years was helping to hunt her down. Martha looked at the babies, so innocent in their slumber. Don't worry, little ones, she whispered. Grandma won't let anything happen to you. Or to your mom. Her phone buzzed with a message from Ethan. Emily's car had blood on the driver's seat. She's hurt, but alive. We're still looking. Martha rocked the twins softly, humming the same lullaby she used to sing to Emily as the night shadows spread across the orchard. She prepared for another vigil, knowing that from now on she could trust no one, not even her best friend. Dawn was still a distant promise when Martha decided to reorganize the baby's belongings again. She couldn't sleep, haunted by the revelations about Carol, and keeping busy was the only thing that kept her calm. That's when her fingers brushed against something different at the bottom of the bag, a tattered red notebook hidden beneath a layer of diapers. With trembling hands, Martha sat on the edge of Emily's old bed, now serving as a baby-changing station. The room was quiet except for the soft breathing of the sleeping twins and the occasional hoot of a distant owl. My diary read the first page in Emily's familiar handwriting. If anything happens to me, give this to my mother. Martha felt her heart skip a beat. Turning the page, she began to read. January 12th. I got the executive assistant job at Harding Construction today. The pay is great, much better than I expected. Richard Harding is intimidating, but kind. There's something in his eyes that reminds me of Dad. Maybe that's why I feel so at ease here. March 15th. Richard has been paying more attention to me lately. Today he invited me to dinner. He said I'm the best assistant he's ever had. He never took his eyes off mine during the entire morning meeting. I should feel flattered, but something bothers me. April 7th. We started meeting after work. It's wrong, I know it is. He's my boss, he's married, he's too powerful. But when we're together, it feels like nothing else matters. Even so, I can't stop thinking about Mom. What would she say if she knew? April 20th. Sam, the accountant, approached me today. Said he needed to show me something. Numbers that don't match, duplicate contracts, companies that don't exist. My stomach turned at the documents. Richard isn't who I thought he was. May 5th. I found out I'm pregnant. Twins. When the doctor showed me the two little hearts beating, I cried. Was it joy? Fear? I don't know anymore. Richard can't find out. Not after what I've discovered about him. May 15th. Sam's been helping me gather evidence. The scheme is bigger than we imagined. Millions diverted, politicians bought, lives ruined. How could I have been so blind? How did I not see the signs? June 1st. I dreamed about the night I left the orchard, 20 years later, and I still wake up in a cold sweat, remembering that threat. Your mother will have an accident if you don't disappear. Now I know. It was Richard. He'd been watching me, planning everything, even before we met. June 10th. Sam says we need to act fast. Richard is getting suspicious, asking questions. My belly isn't showing yet, but it won't be long. Carol came to the office today. The way she looked at me. Does she know? Does she? The creak of a floorboard made Martha freeze. Carol stood in the bedroom doorway, still fully dressed despite the late hour, her eyes fixed on the diary in Martha's hands. Couldn't sleep? Carol asked, her voice strangely controlled. Martha slowly closed the diary, her heart pounding against her ribs. What are you doing here at this hour, Carol? I came to see if you needed any help with the babies. Carol took a step into the room. What's that you're reading? Nothing important, Martha lied, sliding the diary behind her on the bed. Just some old notes. Carol moved closer, her eyes never leaving the partially hidden notebook. Looks like a diary? Why are you really here, Carol? One of the twins stirred, making a small noise. Carol glanced at them, then back at Martha. Richard is getting impatient, she finally said, her voice low but clear. He wants the documents Emily stole. Martha felt a cold shiver run down her spine. So it's true. You work for him. It's not that simple, Martha. Carol took another step forward. Richard has something on me, something that happened a long time ago. The threat to Emily. You were the one who made her leave that night. Carol didn't answer immediately, her eyes wandering over the room, pausing on the faded photos of Emily as a child that still hung on the walls. She was just a girl, Carol, Martha whispered. I had no choice. Richard knew about the accident, about the child who... What child, Carol? Please. Martha, Carol reached out her hand. Give me the diary. Maybe then he'll finally leave me alone. Martha stood, putting more distance between them. You've been my best friend for 30 years. You've known Emily since she was born. How could you? You don't understand. Carol's voice rose, startling the babies. Richard isn't someone you can just say no to. He destroys lives, Martha, entire families, like he destroyed mine. He forced my daughter away for 20 years. Tears rolled down Carol's face now. Forgive me, Martha. Please forgive me. Get out of my house, Martha ordered, her voice trembling with a potent mixture of rage and pain. Now, not without the diary. Carol took another step, something hardening in her eyes. I can't leave without it. The babies began to cry in earnest, sensing the raw tension in the air. Martha moved to position herself between them and Carol. Ethan knows, she said firmly. About you, about Richard, about everything. He's on his way here right now. It was a lie, but it worked. Carol backed away, panic clear on her face. You don't understand, she repeated, already heading for the door. He'll kill me, Martha. Richard will kill me if I don't deliver something, like he killed the nurse who helped deliver the twins. Carol paused in the doorway, her hand gripping the frame. How? It's all in the diary, Carol. Every detail, every crime, every life Richard destroyed. And now I know you helped him do it. Headlights cut through the darkness outside. A car was approaching. Carol cast one last look at Martha, a mixture of pleading and despair in her eyes, then vanished down the hallway. Martha hurried to the window in time to see Carol's car speeding off, its headlights slicing through the night like red, malevolent eyes, leaving only dust and betrayal behind. With shaking hands, Martha grabbed her phone and sent a message to Ethan. Your mom was here. She knows about the diary. Come quick. Then she sat among the crying babies, the diary clutched to her chest, and waited for dawn to break, knowing the night had changed everything. Her best friend was now her worst enemy, and somewhere out there, Emily was still fighting to survive. I'll protect you, she whispered to the twins, rocking them gently. No matter what happens, I'll protect you. I promise." The nor'easter that had been brewing for days finally broke over the orchard that night. Martha was in the kitchen preparing another bottle when the first clap of thunder shook the old windows. Surprisingly, the twins didn't wake. They were beginning to grow accustomed to the orchard's symphony of sounds. The wind howled around the corners of the farmhouse, carrying echoes of other stormy nights when a small Emily would climb into Martha's bed, scared of the thunder. The last storm they had shared was the night Emily had left 20 years ago. A noise on the porch caught Martha's attention, different from the wind, more like a dragging footstep. She froze, bottle still in hand. Ethan had warned her to watch for any suspicious activity, not to open the door for anyone. Then came the knock, weak, almost lost in the roar of the rain, and a voice Martha would recognize even after 100 years of silence. "Mom?" The bottle fell from her hand, spilling milk across the linoleum floor. Martha ran to the door, her hands shaking so badly she could hardly turn the knob. Emily was there, drenched, leaning against the doorframe, blood mixed with rainwater running from a cut on her forehead. She clutched her right side as if her ribs were broken. "Emily," Martha whispered, her heart threatening to burst out of her chest. For a moment they just stood there, the chasm of 20 years of absence, an invisible wall between them. Then Emily staggered forward, and Martha caught her before she could fall. "The babies," Emily murmured as Martha helped her inside. They're fine." Sleeping, Martha guided her daughter to the sofa. "My God, Emily, you're freezing." Emily was shaking violently, her lips tinged with purple from the cold. Martha rushed to get towels and the first aid kit, her maternal instincts kicking into high gear. "We have to get you to a hospital," she said, gently cleaning the cut on Emily's forehead. "No," Emily grabbed her arm. "They're watching the hospitals. Richard has people everywhere." Martha nodded, continuing to clean the wound. Under the warm light of the living room, she saw her daughter clearly for the first time. Emily was thinner than she remembered, with deep shadows under her eyes and a hardened edge that hadn't been there before. But she was still her girl. "How did you get hurt?" "I skidded off the road." Emily winced as Martha applied antiseptic. "Richard found out where I'd been hiding. I had to run. It was raining and the car slid. Why didn't you come straight here? I had to shake them off first. I couldn't risk bringing danger to you." Emily tried to stand. "I need to see my children." "First, we take care of you," Martha insisted, gently pushing her back onto the sofa. "They're safe." The sound of a car approaching made Emily freeze. Martha ran to the window. "It's Carol," she said, noticing how Emily instantly tensed. "She can't see me here," Emily whispered, trying to stand again. "Why?" Martha asked, though she already suspected the answer. Before Emily could reply, Carol walked in. She still had the key, and Martha had never thought to ask for it back. "Martha, I saw the light on, and—" Carol stopped dead at the sight of Emily, all color draining from her face. "Carol," Emily said icily, her eyes locked on the older woman. A flash of lightning illuminated the room, revealing a frozen tableau. Emily on the sofa, wounded but defiant. Carol at the door, pale and tense. Martha between them, finally grasping the true, terrible depth of the betrayal. "You're hurt," Carol finally said, stepping forward. "Stay back," Emily warned, her voice shaking with anger, not fear. "Emily, I can explain." "Explain what?" Emily managed to stand, though she was unsteady. "How you threatened me that night. How you forced me to abandon my mother?" Martha felt the air leave her lungs. Even suspecting it, hearing it confirmed out loud, was a physical blow. I had no choice," Carol whispered. "Richard—" "There's always a choice," Emily interrupted. "I chose to protect my family. You chose to betray yours." A baby's cry cut through the tension. Emily immediately turned in the direction of the sound, her hard expression softening. "Go see your children," Martha said gently. "I'll handle this." Emily hesitated for a moment, then limped toward the bedroom, throwing one last warning look at Carol. The moment Emily was gone, Carol approached Martha. "Martha, please." "No." Martha raised her hand. "No more lies. These aren't lies. Richard has dirt on me, something terrible, if I didn't do what he said. You chose to destroy my family to save yourself." Tears streamed down Carol's face. "I'm so sorry. So sorry." "Leave," Martha ordered, her voice trembling with contained rage. "And don't come back. Martha, you don't understand. Now that Emily's here, Richard will—" "Will what?" Martha took a threatening step toward her former friend. "Send you to threaten us again? Use you to spy on us? It's over, Carol. Over." Carol backed toward the door, looking smaller and older than Martha had ever seen her. "He'll kill us all," she whispered, before disappearing into the storm. Martha locked the door and all the windows before heading to the bedroom. She found Emily sitting in the old rocking chair, cradling both Harper and Owen, silent tears rolling down her face. "They're beautiful," Martha said gently, sitting on the edge of the bed. "They look like their father," Emily replied, then gave a bitter laugh. "Or they did, before he revealed the monster he truly is. Why didn't you tell me?" "That night?" Emily looked at her mother, her eyes full of old pain. "Carol said you'd have an accident if I didn't leave. Said Richard wouldn't hesitate to hurt you to control me. I was 19. I was terrified. And now?" "Now," Emily kissed each baby's head. "Now I'm terrified for them. But I won't run this time. I can't." Martha knelt beside the chair, gently touching her daughter's face. "You don't have to run. We'll face this together." Outside, the storm still raged, but inside that room, a mother and daughter were reunited, 2 generations of strong women protecting the next. And somewhere in the night, Carol typed a message with trembling hands. "Emily is at the farm. But I can't do this. Not anymore." The sun had barely risen when Samuel Davis's car pulled up quietly behind the barn. Martha watched him from the kitchen window, noting how he scanned his surroundings before approaching the house. Emily, still recovering from her injuries, tensed at the sound of his footsteps on the porch. "It's Sam," Martha reassured her daughter. Ethan made sure nobody followed him. Samuel rushed in, carrying a battered folder and a laptop. He had dark circles under his eyes, and his clothes were rumpled, as if he'd slept in his car. "Emily," he breathed in relief upon seeing her. "Thank God you're all right." More or less, she gave a weak smile, touching the bandage on her forehead. Samuel placed his belongings on the kitchen table, glancing nervously out the window. "We don't have much time. Richard's moving the evidence, destroying documents. We need to act now." "What did you bring?" Martha asked, pouring coffee for everyone. "Everything," Samuel said, opening the laptop. "Fake contracts, inflated invoices, suspicious transfers. 5 years of evidence Emily and I gathered." Emily leaned over the screen, her expression hardening. He started wiping his tracks. "Yes, but not fast enough," Samuel said, inserting a flash drive. "We've backed up everything. And there's more. I found links to other schemes, other businessmen. It's an entire corruption network." The sound of a car approaching made them all freeze. Martha hurried to the window. "It's Carol," she announced, noticing how Samuel and Emily exchanged tense looks. "She can't see this," Emily said, starting to gather the papers, but it was too late. Carol walked in without knocking, as she always did. She paused for a moment at the sight of Samuel, then forced a smile. "I didn't know we'd have visitors so early," she commented, stepping closer to the table, her eyes quickly scanning the scattered documents. "What are you doing here, Carol?" Martha asked coldly. "I came to check on Emily," she replied, still studying the papers. "Are these the documents that prove everything?" Samuel discreetly positioned himself between Carol and the laptop. "It's evidence for the authorities." "The authorities can't be trusted," Carol said quickly. "Richard has people on the inside everywhere. You have to put that somewhere safe first." We? Emily raised an eyebrow. "I can help," Carol insisted, her voice almost pleading. "I know a place Richard would never look. I can keep everything safe until Ethan gathers a trustworthy team." Martha observed her old friend, the slight tremor in her hands, the sheen of sweat on her brow despite the mild morning, her restless eyes. "Why would we do that?" Emily asked. "Because—" Carol hesitated. "Because I want to set things right. I want to help this time. Like you helped 20 years ago?" Carol winced at Emily's words. "That was different. I had no choice. And now you do." One of the babies began to fuss in the bedroom. Martha started to go, but Emily stopped her. "I'll go," she said, rising with difficulty. "Don't let her touch anything." Once Emily was gone, Carol stepped closer to the table. "Sam, be reasonable. The police are compromised. We need to protect this evidence." "It's already protected," Samuel replied curtly. "But what if Richard finds out you're here? What if he comes after you?" Carol reached for the documents. "Let me help, please." Martha intercepted Carol's hand before she could touch the papers. "Enough lies, Carol. They're not lies." Carol pulled her hand back, tears shining in her eyes. "Richard will hurt all of you if we don't give him something." The silence that followed her outburst was deafening. Carol clapped a hand over her mouth, realizing too late what she had revealed. "So that's it," Samuel said softly. "He sent you to get the documents." Carol backed toward the door, looking cornered. "You don't understand. He'll kill my son. He'll kill Ethan if I don't." "Ethan already knows," Martha interrupted. "About you, about Richard, about everything." Carol's face went completely white. At that moment, Sophie returned to the kitchen, phone in hand. "Ethan's on his way," she announced, "with a federal team." "It's over, Carol." "No," Carol whispered, tears streaming down her face. "It's not over. Richard won't let— He'll never let—" Before anyone could stop her, Carol grabbed the nearest folder from the table and ran outside. Samuel made a move to follow, but Emily held him back. "Let her go," she said calmly. "Those are fake copies. The real ones are safe." Martha watched Carol's car speed away, dust billowing on the orchard road. 20 years of friendship, ending in a cloud of betrayal and despair. "How long until Ethan's team arrives?" Samuel asked, already packing up the laptop. 20 minutes, Emily replied. "Long enough for Richard to find out those documents are fake?" Martha sank into a chair, feeling the weight of all these revelations. What happens now? Emily gently touched her mother's shoulder. "Now we finish this, once and for all." Outside, the morning sun finally broke through the mist, promising a new day. But for Carol, speeding toward an inevitable reckoning, the darkness was only just beginning. Martha never imagined her last moment of peace would be so ordinary. Emily had gone to meet Ethan to finalize the details of the operation. Samuel had left to retrieve the last of the documents from his hiding place, and she was alone with the twins, fixing an early dinner while they napped. The sun was setting, bathing the kitchen in a warm orange glow. Martha tried calling Carol for the 5th time since she had fled with the fake documents the previous morning. She hadn't answered, hadn't returned any calls. The squeak of the orchard gate drew her attention. Through the kitchen window, she saw a sleek black car driving up the dirt road, kicking up dust in the twilight. Her heart raced when she realized she didn't recognize the vehicle. She ran to the twins' room, phone in hand, to alert Emily. There was no signal. The lines were dead. Footsteps on the porch, heavy, determined, different from Carol's, different from anyone she knew. Martha locked the bedroom door and stood with her body between the cribs and the entrance. The doorknob rattled once, twice, then a voice, low, controlled, and dangerous. "Mrs. Miller, this is Richard Harding. We need to talk." Martha felt a chilly wave pass through her. So this was him. The man who had destroyed her family, threatened her daughter, turned her best friend into a traitor. "Go away," she replied, trying to steady her voice. "The police are on their way." A soft, condescending laugh from the other side of the door. "No, they're not. Nor is your daughter coming any time soon. Her car tires had a mishap." Martha's blood ran cold. "Emily? What did you do to her?" Nothing yet. That depends entirely on you. The sound of something heavy scraping. I have a simple proposal. You give me the real documents, and everyone walks away from this alive. One of the babies stirred, about to cry. Martha held her breath. Ah, yes. Richard's voice came closer to the door. My children are in there, aren't they? How ironic. I come for documents and find the full package. Evidence, heirs, and vengeance. They're not your children, Martha replied, her voice shaking with anger. You lost any right to them when you threatened Emily. Right? Richard laughed again. Mrs. Miller, I think you misunderstand. I'm not asking for permission. A loud crash shook the door. He was trying to break it down. Martha glanced around desperately for something she could use as a weapon. You know where your friend Carol is right now? Richard continued, his tone casual as he slammed the door again. She learned the hard way what happens to traitors. What did you do to her? The same thing I'll do to Emily if you don't open this door right now. The babies began to wail, frightened by the noise. The door shook with every blow, the old hinges starting to give. Last chance, Mrs. Miller, Richard warned. Open the door, give me the documents and the babies, and maybe, just maybe, your daughter makes it through the night. Martha looked at her crying grandchildren, thought of Emily alone on the road, of Carol gone missing. 20 years of her life wrecked by this man. No more. You will not touch my grandchildren, she said, her voice finding a strength she hadn't realized she possessed. Never. The door blew inward with an ear-splitting bang. Richard Harding was exactly as Emily's diary had described him. Tall, elegant, with eyes as cold as ice. He held a piece of wood he must have found in the barn. Impressive, he sneered, tossing the wood aside. Now I see where Emily gets her stubbornness. What do you want? Martha demanded, still standing protectively in front of the cribs. I want what's mine. He took a step forward. The documents? The babies? Your daughter's silence. They aren't yours, aren't they? Richard raised an eyebrow. Just like this orchard wasn't really yours 30 years ago, before a mysterious buyer saved it from foreclosure. Martha felt the floor drop out from under her. What? Oh, Carol never told you. I've been watching your family for a long time, Mrs. Miller. When your husband died, leaving debts, who do you think stopped the bank from seizing everything? Why? Because I always plan long-term. Richard flashed a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Emily was perfect. Young, vulnerable, with a mother who'd do anything to protect her. Carol was just a convenient bonus. Headlights cut through the darkness outside. Richard whirled around. Seems we have company, he muttered, pulling a gun from his jacket. Let's hope it's Emily, so we can wrap this up at once. You won't hurt anyone else, Martha said, her mind racing. She had to keep him talking. Buy time. Mrs. Miller, Richard casually aimed the gun at her. Do you really think you have a choice? More headlights appeared on the orchard road. A lot of them. Federal agents. Ethan's voice thundered from outside. Richard Harding, the house is surrounded. Richard's face twisted in rage. He grabbed Martha by the arm, dragging her in front of the cribs. Where are the documents? He pressed the gun barrel to her temple. Where? Right here, a voice said from the doorway. Carol stood at the entrance, pale but resolute, holding a folder. Her face was bruised, there was blood on her blouse, but her eyes shone with determination. Carol? Richard looked genuinely surprised. How? You should have checked I was truly dead before dumping me from the car, she said calmly. Amateur mistake. The documents? He extended his hand, still gripping Martha. Now. Carol stepped forward, holding out the folder. When Richard moved the gun to take it, she tossed all the contents into the air. Hundreds of papers fluttered around the room like a snowstorm. That moment of distraction was all Martha needed. She slammed her elbow back, hitting Richard hard in the stomach. The gun went off, the bullet lodging in the ceiling. The front door burst open, and the room filled with law enforcement. Ethan led the way, his weapon trained on Richard. Don't move, he ordered. Richard raised his hand slowly, his cold smile still in place. "Impressive plan. You all deserve a round of applause." "It wasn't my plan," Carol said, helping Martha up. "It was hers." Emily entered, unharmed, holding her phone, still recording. "Including your confession about killing Carol or attempting to kill her in this case." Finally, Richard lost his smile as the officers cuffed him. Martha embraced Carol, who was trembling. "Forgive me," Carol whispered. "For everything." "Always," Martha replied, tears running down her face. Emily joined the hug, and for a moment the three of them stood there, crying and laughing at the same time, while the babies, miraculously, drifted back to sleep. The night was over, and with it 20 years of lies, fear, and separation. In the orchard's living room, the silence after Richard's arrest felt as heavy as lead. The federal agents had taken the businessman away, leaving only Ethan, who now stared at his mother with a mixture of pain and disbelief in his eyes. "Why?" he asked simply, his voice raw. Carol sat on the old sofa, looking smaller and more fragile than ever. Martha held her hand. Even after everything that had happened, she couldn't abandon her friend now. Emily stood near the babies, watching with guarded eyes. "Ethan," Carol began, her voice quivering, "there's so much you don't know." "Then tell me," he demanded, sitting in the armchair across from her. "Everything. From the start." Carol looked at Martha, who nodded encouragingly. "Begin with that night, Carol. The night that changed everything." "It was 30 years ago," Carol said, her hands shaking so badly Martha had to squeeze them. "A stormy night like tonight. I'd been drinking. At Judith's birthday party." "Judith?" Ethan frowned. "Aunt Martha's sister?" "Yes." Carol swallowed hard. "Her son, Christopher. He was 5. He ran after a ball." Tears fell freely now. Ethan leaned forward, a cold dread filling his chest. "What happened to Christopher, Mom?" "I didn't see him," Carol sobbed. "It was raining, I'd been drinking, and by the time I realized, it was too late. I panicked. I ran." The sound Ethan made was almost feral. "Christopher, the cousin who died in a hit-and-run that was never solved. It was you?" Martha shut her eyes, decades of pain resurfacing. "Michael, her beloved nephew, the boy who never got to grow up." "Richard found out," Carol continued, her voice barely a whisper. "Years later, when he bought Martha's orchard. He had proof. Photos of the damaged car, witnesses who saw me that night. He said he'd destroy not just me, but you too, Ethan. Said he'd make it look like I planned the whole thing." "So you started working for him," Emily said softly, feeding him information, assisting with his schemes. Carol nodded miserably. "At first it was small things, info about people in town, potential deals. Then he told me to drive Emily away." "You threatened my daughter for him," Martha said, her voice filled with old pain. "He said he'd kill her if I didn't cooperate, said he'd make it look like an accident. Like—" Carol couldn't finish. "Like Christopher," Ethan concluded, his voice cold as ice. "Yes," Carol whispered. "Forgive me, son. Forgive me, Martha. Every day of these 30 years was torture, every lie, every betrayal." Ethan stood abruptly, pacing the room. "The cousin I never met, the cousin everyone mourned, who scarred our family forever, was killed by my own mother." "I didn't mean to," Carol sobbed. "It was an accident, I swear. But running was my choice, my crime. And when Emily got pregnant by Richard," Ethan turned to her, "he also told you to keep me away from the investigation. He knew you were too honest," Carol admitted. "He knew you'd figure it all out if you dug too deep. So he had me use your trust, steal your passwords, monitor the investigation." One of the babies cried, and Emily went to soothe them, the innocent sound a sharp contrast to the dark revelations filling the room. "All these years," Ethan said, his voice choked. "Every time we visited Christopher's grave, comforted Aunt Judith, you were there, pretending to mourn a crime you committed." "I wasn't pretending," Carol lifted her tear-streaked face. Every tear was real, every sleepless night, every nightmare. Christopher never left me, Ethan. He's been with me every night for 30 years. Martha gently let go of Carol's hand. Why not come to me? Why not confess? How could I? Carol looked at her friend. You had just lost your husband. Judith had just lost her son. I was too much of a coward. What now? Ethan asked, his voice breaking. What happens now? Carol stood unsteadily. Now, I do what I should have done 30 years ago. She took off the visitor badge from the police department she'd been wearing, offering it to her son. I'm turning myself in. I'll confess everything. Mom, no. No more running. No more lies. Carol straightened her shoulders. Christopher deserves justice. Judith deserves the truth. And you deserve a mother who isn't a criminal. Emily approached, still cradling the baby. What will happen to her, Ethan? Ethan ran his hands over his tired face. Vehicular homicide, hit and run, obstruction of justice, conspiracy. He trailed off, unable to continue. I'll testify about Richard's blackmail, Emily offered. How he forced her? No, Carol interrupted. I don't want deals. I don't want leniency. I want to pay for what I did. For Christopher, for you, Emily, for everyone I hurt. Martha rose, touching her friend's arm. I'll call Judith. She deserves to hear this from you first. Carol nodded, silent tears falling. Ethan watched his mother, the woman who had raised him, who had inspired him to become a cop, now revealed as the central figure in a web of lies and betrayals. I love you, son, Carol said softly. That was never a lie. Ethan didn't reply. He couldn't. Instead, he retrieved the handcuffs from his belt, his hands trembling so much he could barely hold them. Carol Thompson, his professional voice barely concealed his agony. You are under arrest for the vehicular homicide of Christopher Sullivan, obstruction of justice. As Ethan read his own mother her rights, Martha hugged Emily, who cried silently. The babies, as though sensing the gravity of the moment, remained quiet in their cribs. 30 years of secrets ended on a stormy night, just as they had begun. And in the old orchard's living room, 4 generations of a shattered family finally confronted their most painful truths. Morning sunlight shone through the kitchen window, illuminating the cardboard box Emily had just placed on the table. Carol, wearing a prison jumpsuit and handcuffs, watched with eyes red from crying. Ethan stood beside her, not as a guard, but as a son. Martha, seated in her usual chair, tried to steady her trembling hands. I found this at Carol's apartment yesterday, Emily said softly, opening the box. I think everyone needs to see it. From inside, she lifted an album bound in brown leather. Martha recognized it immediately. It was just like the one she used to make when Emily was little. For 20 years, Emily began, her voice thick with emotion. I never stopped thinking about you, Mom, about all the important dates, all the moments I wished I could share. She opened the album. On the first page, a 19-year-old Emily smiled in front of a college building. The next photo showed her graduation, then her first job, her first apartment. I sent these photos to Carol, Emily continued, asked her to show them to you in secret, to tell you how I was. Martha looked at Carol, who kept her gaze lowered, silent tears running down her cheeks. But she never showed them, Ethan said, his voice still tinged with anger. No, Emily agreed, turning more pages. She did something else. The album revealed more photos, Emily at various points in her life, always alone, always smiling at the camera as if she had a message for whoever might see it. And beside each photo, there were detailed notes in Carol's neat handwriting. Emily looks thinner, Martha read in a trembling voice. She needs to eat better. I'll try to get food to her without raising suspicion. For years, Emily explained, Carol used the money Richard paid her for spying to actually help me. She kept a secret account in my name, left groceries at my door, made sure I had what I needed. But why not show the photos to Martha? Ethan asked, looking at his mother. Carol finally raised her eyes. Because Richard monitored everything. If Martha showed any sign she knew about Emily's life, he'd hurt all of us, Emily finished. So Carol hid every photo, every memory, documenting it all. So that one day, when it was safe, my mother could recover the lost years. Martha took the album with trembling hands, turning the pages slowly. Each photo was a window into the life her daughter had led far away from her. Each note from Carol was an act of love disguised as betrayal. First day at the new job in Boston, she read. Martha would be proud. Emily got the position on her own merits, beating out 50 applicants. Alone again for Christmas, she read on. I sent an anonymous gift, the same blue scarf Martha knitted for her when she was a child. Emily cried when she opened it. Ethan leaned over Martha's shoulder. 30th birthday. Emily spent the night looking at old family photos. I left a cake at her door, the same recipe Martha used to make. You never really abandoned us, Martha said to Carol. Even though you were forced to separate us, you found a way to keep us connected. It wasn't enough, Carol whispered. It could never make up for what I did. But it was something, Emily replied softly. More than Richard ever wanted. It was a silent rebellion that lasted 20 years. Ethan pulled an envelope from his jacket. That's why I got this. Carol eyed the envelope wearily. What is it? A deal, Ethan explained, his voice gentler now. In exchange for your full testimony against Richard, your confession about Christopher, and all the evidence you've saved over the years, the judge agreed to reduce your sentence. I don't deserve it. It's not about deserving, Mom, Ethan interrupted. It's about justice. You were also a victim of Richard, and more importantly, you never stopped trying to make things right, even if in secret. Martha stood, going to Carol. She took her friend's cuffed hands in her own. For 20 years, she said softly, I thought I'd lost my daughter. Now I know that thanks to you, I never truly lost her. You saved every moment, preserved every memory. That doesn't erase your wrongs, but it shows your heart. A baby's cry came from the bedroom, and Emily went to get the twins. She returned carrying them, and they instantly reached out for Grandma Carol. Even during her supervised visits in jail, they had grown attached to her. 5 years, Ethan announced, showing the deal, with the possibility of parole in 3 if you fully cooperate, and permission for regular family visits. Carol began to sob harder. After everything I did. After everything you did, Emily repeated, you deserve a chance to do better, to be the grandmother you already are to my children, to be the mother you never stopped being to Ethan, to be the friend who, even in the darkest moments, never completely abandoned my mom. Martha picked up the album again, flipping to the last page. A recent photo showed Emily, pregnant, smiling with her hands on her belly. Last entry before she goes home, Martha read Carol's note. Finally, after 20 years, the family will be reunited. May God forgive me for my part in keeping them apart, and may they find in their hearts the strength to forgive me too. We already do, Martha said simply, embracing her friend. Ethan joined the hug, followed by Emily holding the babies. There, in the sunlit orchard kitchen, 4 adults and 2 children formed a circle of forgiveness and a new start. Outside, springtime was painting the trees green once more, and inside the old house, old wounds were finally beginning to heal, watered by tears no longer of pain, but of hope. Spring arrived at the orchard in a burst of color. The garden Martha had cultivated for decades was more vibrant than ever, as though the very earth was celebrating this family's rebirth. Daisies and sunflowers swayed in the gentle morning breeze, while the twins, now almost a year old, practiced their first steps on the same lawn where Emily had learned to walk. "Harper, slow down," Emily called, watching her daughter wobble toward a flower bed. Samuel scooped her up before she could tumble, spinning her in the air while she giggled with delight. On the other side of the yard, Ethan held Owen's tiny hands, patiently guiding him through his unsure first steps. Martha watched from the porch, her heart overflowing with joy at the sight of her reunited family. "They grow so fast," came a gentle voice beside her. Carol, wearing an electronic ankle monitor, smiled as Owen finally let go of Ethan's hands and took 3 steps on his own before plopping down on the grass. "Just like their mother," Martha replied, squeezing her friend's hand. Emily was determined like that, too. Carol's supervised visits were now precious moments for everyone. The sound of an approaching car signaled the judge's arrival. Later that day, the old barn would host Emily and Samuel's wedding ceremony. The structure had been fully restored over the past few months, its once weathered walls now ready to celebrate love. "I need to go inside," Carol said quietly. By court order, she wasn't allowed to be seen by people outside the family. "I'll help with the final preparations." Martha watched her friend go, noticing how her shoulders no longer bore the crushing weight of guilt. Confessing to what happened with Christopher, Judith's difficult but sincere forgiveness, and the unconditional love of her grandchildren were slowly healing the old wounds. The day passed in a whirlwind of activity. The barn was adorned with fresh flowers from the garden and delicate string lights. Emily, wearing a simple white dress, seemed to glow with her own inner light. Samuel couldn't take his eyes off her, his grin as bright as the sunbeams shining through the barn's rafters. "Who would have thought," Ethan commented during the ceremony, "that a criminal scheme would bring us to this?" Martha smiled, cradling a sleeping Harper in her arms. Owen, in Carol's lap, had also dozed off after a morning full of excitement. The intimate celebration was perfect. Carol, despite her restrictions, managed to watch from a distance, peering through the kitchen window. When Emily tossed the bouquet, it was Ethan who caught it, drawing laughter and teasing about the young prosecutor who had been visiting the orchard more and more often. Time went on, the seasons changed, and the orchard kept blossoming with new life. Martha expanded her garden with enthusiastic help from her grandchildren. Samuel converted the old office into a modern workspace, managing consulting projects from there. Emily began teaching music in the nearby town, her afternoons filled with piano melodies and children's laughter. When Christmas came, it brought the first snow of the year. The old house, which had once felt too big in its solitude, now overflowed with life and joy. The aroma of gingerbread cookies, an old recipe from Carol, filled every room. Ethan arrived early that Christmas morning, bringing Carol for her authorized visit. She carried carefully chosen gifts from prison, small handmade crafts created with love for each member of the family. "Look who's here," Emily announced to the twins, who now ran more steadily toward Grandma Carol. "My darlings?" Carol knelt to hug them, tears of happiness in her eyes. Harper immediately babbled excitedly about the Christmas tree lights, while Owen proudly showed her that he could now say "Grandma" clearly. The Christmas meal was set in the living room, near a crackling fireplace. Martha looked around, her heart fit to burst. Emily and Samuel side by side, as in love as ever, the twins playing with their new toys, Ethan and Carol sharing a quiet moment of reconciliation. The photos on the walls told their family story, no longer incomplete, no longer broken. "A toast," Samuel proposed, raising his glass. "To the family we choose, to the power of forgiveness, to love that overcomes everything. To the orchard," Emily added, "which never stopped being our home." "To new beginnings," Ethan said, looking fondly at his mother. Carol, tears in her eyes, lifted her water glass. "To hope? To life," she concluded, her voice thick with emotion in all its beauty, its surprises, its pains and joys. "To every moment that led us here." Outside, snow continued to fall softly, covering the orchard in a white blanket of renewal. The twins fell asleep on the rug near the tree, surrounded by gifts and love. Samuel strummed a gentle tune on the old guitar, while Emily sang lullabies from long ago. Martha watched it all from her favorite chair, her heart so full it could barely contain it. The orchard, once too big and empty, now struggled to hold so much love. "You know," Carol whispered, sitting beside her, "after so much darkness, sometimes it's hard to believe we deserve so much light." "It's not about deserving," Martha replied, taking her friend's hand. "It's about accepting, letting love heal, letting forgiveness free us, letting life run its course. Ethan joined them, bringing more hot chocolate, and about building something new on the foundations of the past. Emily and Samuel also came closer, each holding one of the sleeping twins. The family formed a natural circle, as though drawn by an invisible magnet of affection and belonging. "Merry Christmas," Martha said quietly, looking at each beloved face. And there, on that holy night, under the roof of the old orchard that had witnessed so much pain and now sheltered so much joy, a reborn family celebrated not just Christmas, but life itself, with all its complexities, its healed scars, its hard-won forgiveness, and its love. Always, its love, stronger than any storm. The twins sighed in their sleep, as if in agreement. The future stretched ahead, bright and full of possibilities. And on the orchard, now and always, there would be room for more stories, more laughter, more love. Because sometimes fate has mysterious ways of mending what is broken. And sometimes all we need is enough faith to let the healing happen, let love triumph, and let the family, whoever they are, find their way back home.